Welcome to another analysis of one of the 20 CSEC English B poems. This week, we'll take a close look at the poem Dreaming Black Boy by James Berry. In this particular poem, the voice is that of a black schoolboy who lives in a racially prejudiced society. You will find that his long list of wishes reveals the alienation, insecurities, ambition, dreams, regrets, and fears that constantly occupy his thoughts. You should also find that the persona's dreams remain mere dreams, given the prejudices that motivate his society. So, without further ado, let's begin by reading the poem. Dreaming Black Boy by James Berry. I wish my teacher's eyes wouldn't go past me today. Wish he'll know it's okay to hug me when I kick a goal. Wish I myself wouldn't hold back when answer comes. I'm no wood chopper now, like all ancestors. I wish I could be educated to the best of tune-up and earn good money and not sink to lick boots. I wish I could go on every crisscross way of the globe and no persons or powers or hotel keepers will make it a waste. I wish life wouldn't spend me out opposing. Wish same recreation will have me stand, it will have me stretch and hold high my voice, Paul Robeson's. My inside eye is sun. Nobody wants to say hello to nasty answers. I wish torch throwers of night would burn lights for decent times. Wish plotters in pajamas would pray for themselves. Wish people wouldn't talk as if I dropped from Mars. I wish only boys were scared behind bravadours, for I could suffer. I could suffer a big lot. I wish nobody would want to earn the terrible burden I can suffer. This is a key reminder to like, comment, and subscribe. The title of the poem, Dreaming Black Boy, appropriately suggests that the persona is a black male. In doing so, it prepares the reader for the dreams and aspirations of a black child that are mere dreams. So intrinsically, the fact that the boy's skin color is mentioned in the title suggests that his dreams and aspirations are just mere dreams and challenges and even hardships that are peculiar or similar to the black race. Let's begin with stanza 1. Stanza 1 begins, I wish my teacher's eyes wouldn't go past me today. Notice the use of the first person pronoun in the form of I, okay? And as a way of reminder, note that the first person point of view is a mode or method of storytelling in which someone recounts events from their own perspective or point of view, using first person pronouns such as I, okay? Notably, the first person point of view allows us or allows readers to delve deeply into the mind of the persona, giving the reader full access to the persona's thoughts, feelings, and knowledge. So in the case of this poem, we have the privilege of learning about the persona's longing for justice, a congratulatory hug, freedom to travel, and equality. And as a result, we get the emotional trauma and experiences of the black boy, and they're all highlighted, evoking sympathy in us as readers. Okay? So that's the power and the importance of the first person point of view. So now we are given the privilege of learning about these strong yearnings that the persona has. He says that I wish. Notice the use of the word wish. When the word wish is used, it basically tells us that the persona has a strong yearning or desire for something. So I wish my teacher's eyes wouldn't go past me today. It's an example of visual imagery because it appeals to our sense of sight. We can therefore visualize the teacher ignoring the boy in the classroom. Whenever she asks a question or whenever somebody's hands go up, or it can even be the entire class or even the persona and somebody next to him, the teacher will not call on the persona for nothing. The teacher will always call over him or call on another student to do something. It doesn't matter what he says in the classroom. It appears as though he's a zombie. You know, he's there, but he's not there. So the persona, which it tells us to, and it evokes sympathy, as I said, in us as readers, you know, because we see this boy, like every other child in the classroom, every other student, being ignored, right? So I wish my teacher's eyes wouldn't go past me today. It therefore visualizes the teacher's habit of ignoring the boy in the classroom, okay? There's also the use of repetition because we are seeing the word wish again. Wish he'll know it's okay to hug me when I kick a goal, right? And because the word wish is repeated, it tells us that the persona, not the person, it tells us that the the personas, this is really bothering the person to begin with, and it tells us that the literary device called repetition is at play here. Okay, notice that, and note, I must say that when repetition is used, it's used because the poet and the persona wants to emphasize or highlight a particular word or idea in our mind, right? The persona wants us to pay attention to a particular feeling or even what he or she is saying or talking about in that moment. So it is repeated. So let's see what is said. Which he'll know it's okay to hug me when I kick a goal. So they therefore tells us, because the persona has now identified a gender as it relates to a teacher, it tells us that the persona is referring to his PE teacher or even his coach, right? So he's saying that, it's okay to hug me when I kick a goal, right? It's okay to hug me, and goal there is and it can be used as a metaphor, right? Because literally, when we think about kicking a goal, what comes to mind is the game of soccer or the game of football, depending on what you call it, depending on what you call it in your part of the world, right? But the idea is when you kick a ball in the net, when you're playing football, you gain a point, and as a result, your team is often happy, right? So the person is saying that when I kick a goal, whether that goal is literal or even figurative, it can even be seen in the case that kicking a goal can be seen as, for example, scoring 100 on a math test or any subject area, or even 90s and 80s, something that is commendable. I wish that you will see that as you will see that as something good. You will see the need to hug me, just as well, it's implied, just as other students in my class receive hugs as well. Okay, so I wish he'll know that it's okay to hug me when I kick a goal. So notice that the person saying I wish he'll know, which tells us that the person has a lot of things in his mind, on his mind, that the teacher is unaware of. Okay. No, so I want to bring to mind that it's also an example of visual imagery, and the idea of being hugged after doing something that is commendable, right, such as kicking a goal. And also we said kick a goal is an example of a metaphor, right, and also it creates visual imagery as well. And also the reference to the game of soccer and football is used there, right, just to help to build that visual imagery. There's also another wish then, of course, we are seeing the word wish being repeated again, so we know that the literary device of repetition is at play again. So I wish I myself wouldn't hold back when answers come. So the person therefore recognizes, and he's admitting it, and it tells us that the person is very self-aware that he is to be blamed for what is happening here. What does the person say? He said that wish I myself wouldn't hold back when answers come. The person recognized that, I am playing a part of this. I'm contributing to what is happening in my society, because it tells us that even when the person is placed in situations where he can speak up, he sits there and he says nothing whatsoever, right? I wish that I myself wouldn't hold back. I wish that I can speak up, and, I will make my presence felt whenever I am there, whenever a question is being asked. So it's one thing for me to blame the teachers for ignoring me or going past me today and not hugging me when I do something commendable. I myself, I am responsible for it as well. Okay, and also notice the use of the repetition of the pronoun I wish, which tells us that the persona, he's really emphasizing the point that he has played a part in this condition or this type of situation where racism is concerned in his society, by not making his presence or his presence felt, nor his voice heard, right? So this needs to be changed. Also, let's move to the last two lines of stanza 1. It says that I'm no wood chopper now, like my ancestors. Okay, no, I'm no wood chopper now, like all my ancestors. The first and foremost is an example of a simile, right? But notice the word wood chopper there being used as a metaphor as well. Okay, so it can be a metaphor to things or jobs that are considered to be low, or even the jobs that are considered to be of less importance, right? So the person is basically saying that at the end of the day, I am black, but I am not in a position where my ancestors used to be. I am in a position where they were never placed in. And it also alludes to slavery to begin with, right? Because slaves were not able to, go to school to learn to read and write and so on. But he recognized that I have that privilege now. That's why he's blaming himself. I'm really no wood chopper. I am in a classroom even sitting next to white children, something that did not exist years ago. Persons actually fought for me to be where I am today. And I'm saying that it alludes to slavery because the history of slavery spans many cultures, right? Nationalities, regions from ancient times, even to present day. However, hundreds and thousands of Africans were, as we know, sold and kidnapped from Africa to northern countries and forced into slavery and exploited to work in production of crops, be them sugar or even tobacco. Notably, though, landowners sought to make their slaves completely dependent on them through the system of restricted codes. For example, they were usually banned or prohibited from learning to read and write, which I mentioned earlier, and their behavior and movements were restricted, right? So the person is saying that my movements are not restricted in this case. My opportunity, especially where education is concerned, it's different from them. So I need to remind myself that I am no wood chopper. I am not in the position of my ancestors or black people or black children who have gone before me, right? And of course, it's an example of a simile because it highlights the boy's awareness of the opportunities and rights available to him that were not available to his black ancestors. And it tells us and it highlights the persona's need to be confident and assertive. He really needs to be confident and assertive. And he recognizes that and he has admitted that as well. I am no wood chopper now like my ancestors. Okay, and of course, I have identified some words you can use as diction. Remember, when you are commenting on diction or you're using diction as a poetic device, you have to first state diction to get the mark. You have to go and identify the word in the poem. You have to use an example of how it is used in the poem, and you have to discuss and just tell your assessor, your examiner, as you're answering that question, how this word aided your understanding of the situation in the poem, how it aided your understanding of the conflict or whatever is happening in the poem. Okay? Stanza 2. The stanza 2 begins, I wish I could be educated to the best of tune-up. Notice that stanza 2 begins with a repetition as seen in stanza 1 via I wish. Okay, so it tells us that the person has a lot that he yearns and desires. Okay, so he says that I wish I could be educated. I wish I can be educated. I wish I can achieve an education, but not just any education, the best of tune-up. Okay, now the word tune-up there, it's an example of a metaphor and also auditory imagery. When we think about tune-up, it actually means warm-up or to adjust a musical instrument to the correct or uniform pitch in order to ensure peak efficiency. So in the case of this poem, the person wants to achieve the best possible education. Okay, so that's what the person means when he said that he wants to achieve the best of tune-up. It's also an example of auditory imagery because it appeals to a sense of hearing. So we, the reader, can hear the sounds of musicians testing and even practicing their instruments to perform at their best. It tells us that the person is ambitious and he's self-aware. He knows that he needs these things because one, he lives in a racist society, and another thing is that these are some things that are achievable for other persons, so why not him? Okay, so he says that I wish to be educated to the best of tune-up and earn good money. Not just any money, not just any salary, but good salary. Enough for him to be able to afford housing and rent, at a particular scale and not be limited because of his blackness. Okay, he also said that he doesn't want to sing to lick boots. Sing to lick boots. Okay, this is also a metaphor, because basically when we talk about or the expression sing to lick boots is used, it is basically referring to do something that is wrong, low or disgraceful in order to impress someone in authority, right? In order to acquire a job or a promotion. And sometimes you hear stories about persons doing some disgraceful things in order to get a promotion and even a job. The person is saying that he doesn't want this for himself, which shows and tells us that the persona has integrity. Okay, the persona doesn't want to be begging in order to acquire things in life. And notably, the word boots is located on a new line really for emphasis. And it basically, the explosive B in boots, therefore it indicates the persona's anger, right? And even disgust for such activity, the activity of sinking to lick boots. the idea of actually just doing things that are disgraceful for somebody in authority just so that they can give you a higher salary, a promotion, or just something. Okay, the person doesn't want this. Also, it tells us where the metaphor is concerned, saying to lick boots. I said that the person wants to achieve the best of education. He doesn't want to do things that are wrong or disgraceful in order to impress people in authority. And I said that it shows integrity, where characterization is concerned for the persona. And I also said that it's an example of visual imagery, right? Because it appeals to a sense of sight. And we can therefore visualize the person, or even person, not the person, because the person said that he doesn't want this. We can therefore visualize someone actually sinking down to lick somebody's dirty shoes, just so that they can get a particular thing, right? And also the idea of cleaning boots, it's something, is really, I don't want to say rather correct, but it's way in which blacks actually own muddy during slavery, even after slavery years ago as well. Shining shoes, that imagery comes to mind. But the idea of licking a shoe, something that touches the ground, is really disgusting. And it therefore tells us that it creates disgust where mood is concerned in the reader as well, the act of seeing or even visualizing somebody doing that. So let's move on. So the person also wishes that I wish I could go on every crisscross part of the globe, right? The person wishes that he can travel, right? And no persons or powers or hotel keepers will make it a way, sorry. So the person wishes that he can go on every crisscross way of the globe. Crisscross them is actually a pattern of intersecting straight lines or paths. It also means to move back and forth in a particular pattern. So the person basically wants to convey to us that he wishes that he can go all over the place in crisscross manner. For example, he could go to Barbados, Trinidad, St. Vincent, the USA, Canada, all over the place, right? Not in no particular manner. And in doing so, and then also in the process, no person, no powers, nobody, regardless of their authority, regardless of the power that they hold, will actually stop him. He will not encounter, for example, racism by hotel keepers, right? These powers and persons who are listed there are basically persons who are gatekeepers, okay? Now, the gatekeeping in itself is the activity of controlling or usually limiting general access to something. Okay, those are gatekeepers. But when we talk about gatekeeping, it's basically the activity of controlling something, right? Controlling, or the practice of controlling access to information, advanced levels of study, elite section of society, or even general activities, right? And these are basically done by persons who have some sort of status or authority. So the person is acknowledging, and he's very self-aware. He knows that because of his black skin, these are some of the challenges he has to endure if he were to even take upon himself to travel the globe. He's saying that, I really wish to travel the globe, but in doing so, I want to just go. It doesn't matter which part of the world I go. I want to do that without being denied access because of this racism, because I am black. Okay? And also, I want to also highlight that the idea is of crisscross. When we think about crisscross in itself, the word crisscross, I said that it's a pattern of intersecting lines and paths, right? But it basically emphasizes, the person wants to emphasize that basically he wants his freedom. He recognizes that his community society is so racist that he will be limited. And it therefore tells us that even as a child, a young black child recognizes that this exists in his society because he would have heard about it, observed about it, read about it. This is his reality. This is why he's wishing for this particular change. And even though he's wishing, and the fact that the word a wish is used, what comes to mind is that term when people say that they wish upon a star, which tells us that he's basically doing it in vain because his society will not change. It's there inbred inside of them. They're not going to do anything about it because it's prevalent, it's there. But, he's therefore sharing with us what is in his thoughts because that's the privilege we have via the use of the first person point of view. Okay? And hopefully by even witnessing, this is why literature is so beautiful sometimes, because one of the aim of literature and studying literature, even teaching literature itself, is that your aim really should be to teach people to be empathetic, being able to, being given the privilege of studying culture and seeing things from different perspectives should lead you to be empathetic towards others as well, right? Especially when you are able to hear somebody else's point of view or different point of views. So as a result of being exposed to the person's point of view, I'm hoping at least, like me, you are feeling empathy for the persona. Okay? So we have there some example of there's some words that you can use from stanza 2 where diction is concerned. Remember, you have to say diction, you have to give an example of diction in the poem, and then you explain in detail how this word aided your understanding of the poem. Stanza 3. Stanza 3 begins, I wish life wouldn't spend me out opposing. So we see another example of repetition there at the beginning of stanza 3, and also it's in line 2 of stanza 3 as well. So let's see what else the person wishes. The person wishes that life wouldn't spend me out opposing. The person is basically saying that because the word spend there means exhaust or even too tired. Okay, he's saying that he wishes that he would not spend his entire life fighting against life for the ability to just be there, right? He wishes that he will not be constantly having to defend himself against racism or different things or that will be done or even said to him because he is a black person. So I wish life wouldn't spend me out opposing there. The word opposing means to attempt to stop the progression of something or even to resist or antagonize by physical means. He really wishes to just go through life because he's human, right? And not because he seemed different to anybody else, because he certainly isn't. So I wish life wouldn't spend me out opposing, right? Notice that life actually challenges and opposes the person as if it's a human being, right? Therefore, that's an example of personification because life is being given the quality of fighting with the persona as if it has hands and feet, preventing the person from traveling across the world or even gaining the best of tune-up, and even being given the attention by the teachers if life is responsible for that. Life is actually concocting or actually drafting devices and traps to constantly give the persona troubles, okay? So I wish life wouldn't spend me out opposing. Spend me out opposing is also, it's an example of visual imagery, you know, because you can visualize the person just constantly there defending himself, whether at immigration, whether it's at school, whether, you know, fighting even for the teacher's attention, putting his hand up and being ignored, right? Those are all examples of visual imagery as well. The person went on and he says that, but before I move on, I just want to highlight that the repetition in this case, as we go through, you will see that it emphasizes the persona's yearning to be treated equally by everyone rather than constantly defending himself. Okay, that's basically what stanza 3 is about, and by conveying his wishes, right? So line 2 of stanza 3, we hear that the persona wish the same way creation will have me stand, it will have me stretch. So the person is saying the same way creation, the same way God will have me stand, the same way I am called to be the salt of the earth, the same way I'm given the privilege of being born, the same way I am human like everyone. You know, this actually shows that I was called into this world to stand to be just as everyone else, that it will have me stretch, it will have me succeed. You know, it will have me go through the different challenge, not just the different challenges, but I'll be given the same opportunities. I'll be treated equally as well. I will stand like everyone else. So the same way creation or God, you know, would have given me the opportunity to enter this world, I really hope that it will give me the same privilege to stretch, right? The word stretch there means literally to be made or be capable of being made longer or even wider without tearing or breaking. He's hoping at the end of the day as well, you can look at it in terms of he's hoping that at the end of the day that life will give him the strength that he needs to even persevere amidst the racism and the different criticism and discrimination he has to put up with. Okay, he's hoping that he will endure all of this. And even when we consider the word stretch, it means even to cause something to reach often as far as possible in a particular direction. And you will see why the person says this, because he even went on and he says, and hold high my voice, Paul Robeson. Notice that to have me stretch is basically, it's an example from metaphor, because it doesn't really mean to just physically stretch his hand on a board while his hands are tied with ropes and they're trying to pull his body apart. Okay, it's basically a metaphorical way of saying or even emphasizing the person's desire to succeed in spite of life's pains and pressures, right? And even uneducated responses, which you will see in the final line of stanza 3. The person also says, and hold high my voice. The person wishes to have a voice. He wishes to be heard as well. So also, when the person says that he wouldn't he will hope that life won't spend him out opposing, and wishes the same way creation will have me stand, it will have me stretch and even hold high my voice. Basically, the persona is basically wishing that his situation in life, in his prejudiced society, will not constantly force him to object to things, because it tires him out, it exhausts him. Okay? And he's saying that the same way creation will have him stand, the same way God, like a teacher, orders him to stand, perhaps to stand the pain and pressures encountered, it will also instruct him to stretch and hold high. Okay, so the person is basically proclaiming his pride to be identified with Paul Robeson. Okay, so who was Paul Robeson? And Paul Robeson there is an example of reference and not an allusion. An allusion is an indirect reference to something. It's an indirect way of saying something in order to shed in order to shed insight on something. But notice that the persona wasn't indirect. He's being direct, so therefore it's a reference, which is also a poetic device and not an allusion. Okay, so let's say a little about Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson was a great African-American singer of the mid-90s who achieved success in several areas of life. So notice that he was black as well. And amidst his blackness, he achieved success in several areas of life. He is considered to have stretched metaphorically, as he succeeded as an outstanding singer, actor, intellectual, athlete, and activist for civil rights, peace, racial justice, and improve labor relations. So we therefore understand why the persona is referencing Paul Robeson in this case, because he identifies with him, he wants to be like him, he recognizes that Paul Robeson would have met his same challenges, this same discrimination, this same idea of racism, or even racism generally, yet he succeeded. So he's saying that hold high my voice, Paul Robeson, my inside eye, a son. Okay, he's basically saying that when he look within himself, his inside eyes, he wants to shine like the sun for others to see his worth, because he recognizes that he has worth and he can feel it is inside of him as well. Okay, and he also said, and my inside eye, a son, is also an example of a metaphor, because it basically, like I said, to have me stretch, it basically continues to emphasize a personal desire to succeed in life and to really show or highlight that he knows that he is worthy of the same things that other persons of different races, are given, the same privileges. He recognizes that he's educated, he has a voice, it's inside of him, he knows that it's inside of him, and therefore he wants to hold it high, he wants others to see it. Okay, and the last line of stanza 3 says that nobody wants to say hello to nasty answer. Nasty answer is another example of a metaphor. Nobody wants to be talking to somebody who whenever they are saying something in a sentence, all they know, for example, are colloquial words. Not that colloquial words or even the informal language is not a sign of education, but he wants to be able to achieve an education, get to a good salary, get to a particular position in society, and even when he's communicating, he will be able to talk about things of different genres. Okay, he's not just limited to things that are just peculiar maybe to his race. Okay, so the person also see when he says that nasty answers, the person shows us that really and truly because he is black, whenever he's traveling to different parts of the world, right? In this case, the word globe was used in a previous stanza. He recognizes that he will always be fighting against gatekeepers. He will always have to be defending himself because of his black skin. And because of that, he recognizes that he can get really frustrated and angry, and then always be defending himself and arguing with other persons, that the temptation is always there for persons to perceive him as if he's nasty, as if he's uneducated, as if he's always upset. Okay, and everything that he's saying he's always aggressive. Okay, as if he's constantly against other races. So that's how you can look at the nasty answers as well. Okay, so these are some of the examples of poetic devices in the poem, and of course I have some examples of diction. Feel free to add any of them, and remember to always comment in detail how they aided your understanding of the poem. Stanza 4. Stanza 4 begins, I wish torch throwers of night will burn lights for decent times. So we are seeing repetition again in the form of I wish, as we saw in stanza 1, 2, and 3, and again here in stanza 4. And of course, we will see basically whenever there's the word wish is used, and that repetition is basically there to emphasize or to highlight the person's longing for something. And each time the person is very specific in terms of what he desires and what he longs for. Okay? So the person is saying that I wish torch chores of night. Who or what are these torch chores? So before we move on, or even before I explain the torch chores elements of line 1 of stanza 4, I want to pay attention to the alliteration. Okay, the T is alliterated in the word torch and also in chores there. And we know that alliteration is often used to emphasize a particular idea or a particular concept or a particular meaning. The poet or the person wants us to pay very special attention to something, to someone, to somewhere, okay? Or in this case, the particular words, torch chores, okay? So torch chores, it's an example of alliteration. It's also an example of visual imagery, and it's also an allusion to the Ku Klux Klan, okay? Notice that they were torch chores of night. Who are these Ku Klux Klan who are these Ku Klux Klan that the persona is referring to? And I'm saying because sometimes you see even on popular TV news stations, especially those international, sometimes you will see different activities of persons dressed like them doing similar activities as well. Okay, so let me just say this about the Ku Klux Klan. The person alludes to the Ku Klux Klan to talk about them as it relates to one of the wishes that he has. When he uses the Ku Klux Klan, the person alludes to them because they are commonly known as KKK. They are or were a secret hate group in southern USA that targeted blacks, Muslims, Jews, Catholics, foreign-born individuals, and even other discriminated groups. Okay? They wore white hooded masks and long white robes as they burned the homes of black people and anyone who protected them. And they sought the restoration of a white supremacy through intimidation, torture, arson, and violence. Okay? So the person is saying that I wish the torch chores of night. Torch chores of night is an example of not Ku Klux Klan, but it's an allusion to the Ku Klux Klan. And remember, an allusion is an indirect reference. That's the difference between a reference and an allusion, as I was explaining before. A reference will be in a case where the person called the name. Notice that he didn't come out and say Ku Klux Klan in comparison to what we saw earlier with Paul Robeson, who is an actual person who existed in history. In this case, we know that torch chores of night refers to the Ku Klux Klan because of their activities and they were a hate group and they were constantly there dressed at night. So whenever they are going to kill a black person or some discriminated group, they dressed in a particular attire. Okay, and their activity had a particular pattern as well. So the person always says that I wish torch chores of nights. Okay, so the person wishes that these people, the Ku Klux Klan, whose activity was very nocturnal, they occurred at night, will burn lights for decent times. It's very important to note that the Ku Klux Klan often yes, they wanted to restore white supremacy, but they claim that they did it in the name of God. So they're killing this black person in the name of God because they want to ensure that there's one race, and that race is actually that of the Caucasian race. Okay, and notice that because they claim that it was an act of God, that they were doing it on behalf of God. They figured that they were carrying the light of God and they were burning light. These are all keywords which tells us that the person is really alluding to the Ku Klux Klan. Notice that they think that they had the light. And the person is saying that I wish that these torch chores at night will burn light for decent time. Decent times there tells us that it's not the case that the person wishes that they will come during the day to burn the house, but decent times suggest that they will use their influence, this so-called influence or activity which they claim to be doing in the name of God. They will use it for decent times. Okay, they will do it for their soul salvation and even for ways that are compassionate and loving. Okay. So the person wishes that bad people who use torches to hurt others would burn light to help others instead, right? Showing them the way to live decent life. It therefore suggests that the person is implying that basically what they're doing is not decent. This is not acting in the name of God. This is not a God thing that you're doing. Okay, so I wish torturers and knights will burn lights for decent times. Okay, so light there can be seen as a literal light, that torch that they carried in their hands at night as they meet and at the home of their victims, that they will use this light to tell person about the light of the world, who is Christ Jesus. That's what the person is saying. So he's also implying, right, that really and truly they are not true Christians. They are not the light of the world, because what they are doing is basically darkness. Okay, it points to darkness rather than light. So therefore we can also see the poetic device of contrast coming out there as well. And of course, decent time is an example of a metaphor, because the person is basically saying, when he talks about decent times, he's talking about helping and just living decently. Okay, what you're doing is not something decent. Okay, now let me point out that visual imagery is seen in torturers, because we can therefore visualize the Ku Klux Klan or the KKK in their custom wear, holding torches to burn the homes of the blacks and their sympathizers at night. Okay, and it's also there used in that the second part of stanza 1, which I'm about to go into. The person says, "Wish plotters in pajamas will pray for themselves." Okay, we see of course repetition there in the word wish, and we are seeing alliteration as well. The P is alliterated in plotters, and it is also alliterated in pajamas as well. So therefore we know that the poet and even the person wants us to pay attention. And specifically, just like the alliteration in line 1, where line 3 is concerned, the person wants to draw our attention to the fact that there be the Ku Klux Klan, who he is alluding to, they are being described as plotters, because of course they plan. Okay, these things or they act, it's very premeditated. So they are plotting, they plot, they plan, they scheme, and notice that their attire is that of, their attire resembles that of pajamas. Okay, which plotters in pajamas, and they plot because usually whenever they meet, let me go back and show you this photo, right? Usually when they meet, basically, right, so I was saying that basically when they meet, they always meet, they met in as a group. Okay, it's usually a group of them wearing the same type of clothing as well. Okay, so of course we know that, you know, the act is premeditated. So the person says that which plotters in pajamas would pray for themselves, right? Because you are saying at the end of the day that what you are doing is an act of God. You are killing black people, you're killing Muslim, you're basically killing persons just so that this white supremacy agenda could actually perpetuate, right? And if you're really doing this in the name of God, basically you need to pray for yourself, because you're killing persons, and the Bible clearly says that thou shalt not kill. Okay, so the person is saying at the end of the day, the person is implying that if there's anybody who needs prayer, if there's anybody who needs this burning light, it's the Ku Klux Klan. It is those bad persons, not just the Ku Klux Klan, but those bad persons who continue to kill persons in the name of religion, right? And just because their skin color is different from theirs, they do not look like them, even though we are all human beings. So the person now wishes that plotters in pajamas will pray for themselves rather than throwing torches and burning the homes of blacks and their sympathizers. Let me also say this before I move on. Note that for this particular line, those two lines, the person wishes that bad people will go to bed, not making evil plans, but praying for themselves instead, realizing that their own doom is a result of their own plots. So that their doom, if they think they are doing this so that they can get into heaven, or they will gain some celestial praises or reward, at the end of the day, they are only praying themselves into hell. That's what the person is saying, a very clever way there. The person went on and he said, "Wish people won't talk as if I dropped from Mars." We know that Mars is one of those planets, just like planet Earth and the different planets out there. And basically, when we talk about Mars, when persons talk about Mars generally, it's usually associated with ideas of aliens or somewhere creatures, who do not look like us. They do not belong to Earth. So the person is saying that this is the way in which he feels ostracized in his society, in his community, because of his skin color. And when people talk about him, they talk about him as if he doesn't belong there. But the person is saying that I wish that this is not the case. Remember earlier he said that the same way creation will have me stand, it will have me stretch. So the same way creation, the same way God allows me to be born here on earth, I must be able to dwell here and do the things like everyone else, rather than being treated or even talked about as if I belong to a different planet. So linked with the persona's wishes about bad people being reformed by his desires to be treated as if he belongs, right? This is linked to it. And it therefore suggests that the torch throwers and plotters are those engaged in racist attacks, right? So drop from Mars is an example for a metaphor, because the persona basically wants to highlight the fact that this is how he feels, this is how he's being treated. And it basically compares the persona, the treatment of the persona, with that which he desires, the way in which he desires to be treated. And he can clearly see that he's being treated differently. Look, even when we go back to stanza 1, we see that the teacher's eyes will go past him today. We see that when he kick a goal, that he doesn't receive a hug like everybody else, you know? So the person is saying that this is mass treatment. You know, of course, they don't have any treatment, nothing to really compare in reality to say that really and truly, this is how we treat an alien. But the person recognizes that he's not being treated as if he's a human being, and the opposite of that is an alien or somebody who is from Mars as well. Okay? And of course, there I just want to highlight again the visual imagery there in line 1, the torch throwers, and you notice there by the side, and it's also in plotters in pajamas, because we're seeing a group of people who would have schemed and actually decide to meet at a particular time to do the activity, and of course the attire, the type of clothes that they wore while they were on their way, or while they met at the homes, or even their meetings to scheme to kill blacks and other sympathizers and even other discriminated groups. And of course, I have some diction there. Feel free to add any of them. Stanza 5. Stanza 5 begins, I wish only boys were scared behind bravadours, for I could suffer. So right away, we are seeing wish being repeated there, right? Because it continues to emphasize the persona's yearning and desire for things to change, right? And notice that the person continues to be specific. So each wish has a specific idea or change that the person wishes to bring about, okay? So the person says that I wish only boys were scared behind bravadours. Boys were scared behind bravadours is an example of visual imagery, because first and foremost, it appeals to our sense of sight, okay? And it therefore creates the imagery of adults and children hiding from the same prejudice and discriminations the person experienced in his childhood. This is because the word bravado in itself means, it actually refers to pretended bravery, or even means to show courage, especially when unnecessary and dangerous, in order to make someone admire you. So this really pretense. And it gives the appearance of courage or confidence that someone shows in order to impress other people. The person is saying that I wish that boys alone were scared behind bravadours. I wish that boys or children, they were the one who actually showed this pretend bravery and confidence, for I could suffer. He said he really wished that this was not the case, because he could suffer. It therefore suggests that the person wishes that adults were not doing it. It implies that the idea of pretend bravery, right, was a condition for children alone. It tells us that as long as you are black, as long as you look like the persona, that you are treated the way in which the persona treated, what the persona was treated, and as a result, they were there hiding or pretending to be brave against these different challenges or these different difficulties that are out there or they continue to face. The persona really wishes that this would have stopped in childhood, so by the time he became an adult, he didn't have to put up this, but this is not the case. This is why the persona, by using the word I wish, it therefore gives us the impression that, you know, the most he can do is just wish things will not change. This basically what he's yearning or longing for only exists in dreams, and it will only stay there. So I wish only boys were scared behind bravadours, for I could suffer suggests that the adults in the persona's life, the black adults, they were given this sense of pretense, bravery, and courage as well. So the person recognized that really and truly, not even the adults can even protect me, right? And he even recognized that he could suffer. He's suffering now, but he could really suffer because the adults are not there. And even when he becomes an adult, it's the same thing he will be doing, this pretense bravery as well. The person is very self-aware. He's observing his community, his environment, and he's well aware of, you know, what he can be and what he cannot be, and even the things that he wishes to change as well. Okay, the person went on, he said that I could suffer. Notice that suffer there is repeated. We have a lot of repetition here. I could suffer a big lot, not just a lot, but a big lot. A big lot there is, it's emphasized, it's repeated in order to emphasize that the persona will suffer even into adulthood, and he will suffer a great deal, even more than what he's suffering now as a child because of his black skin color. Okay, and he went on and he says that I wish nobody want to own the terrible burden I could suffer. The persona is even, to some extent, it seems as though he's even blaming himself for the suffering that he's receiving or experiencing in this case, to the extent that it seems so strong. It impacts the reader. It evokes even more empathy out of the reader, because at the end of the day, if you want to put an end to his suffering for him, right? But the person is using words like I wish still, and him suffering a big lot in order to show the degree and the depth of the pain and suffering that he continues to endure because of his skin color, right? And let me just say that where repetition is concerned, but even before I get to the repetition, those the last two sentences there in stanza 5, the person basically wants to highlight that he seems to be wishing that his condition of being scared, even the beginning of stanza 5, it highlights the fact that the persona seems to be wishing that his condition of being scared while pretending to be bold, which is behind bravadours, will not last beyond childhood, as I explained. Okay, but later on in stanza 5, where he talks about I wish that nobody that he will suffer a big lot and so on, the person basically seems to be wishing that nobody else will want to be in his place, to own the terrible burden he can suffer, and he appears to believe that he in some way is to be blamed for his difficulties and even those ahead, right? So with the use of the repetition that we are seeing here in stanza 5, they basically emphasize the persona's yearning for the conditions of being scared that it will not last beyond childhood, which I said earlier, and if so, he will experience hardship and pain when he becomes an adult. There's the example of visual imagery there. It appeals to the reader's sense of sight, and it creates the imagery of adults and children hiding from the same prejudices and discrimination the person experiences in childhood. And of course, there's some example of diction. Feel free to add any more if you can think about them. Here's a summary of the poem. You may pause and take a quick read. There are some themes in this poem. We have childhood experience. This in itself is an experience of a child. The persona shares with us the experience of being in a classroom as a child, being ignored by his teacher, not receiving a hug, to commend him for the good work. And basically, the person recognizes that all the difficulties that he's facing here, that he wishes that it is something that remained in childhood. It is not that it's a characteristic of childhood in itself, but therefore the entire poem is there an experience of a child. Okay, it's also an example of people and desires, because we see the desires of the persona, who is a person. He's desiring for change to occur. He's desirous for racism to end and to be treated as if he's a human being. Instead of being ostracized, instead of being ignored in the classroom. He really wishes for things to be different. And of course, all of these desires the persona has, they can be identified by the use of the word wish or I wish in the poem. Okay, there are many of them. Conflict and complications. We see the conflict in the poem. The person's skin color with persons who have a different skin color, and the complication that exists there, where the person even realizes that at the end of the day, and the same way creation, as he said, will have me stand, it will have me stretch. But because of his skin color, persons are not accepting that he is human being, that he, like them, was given the opportunity to enter this world to, just gain all that he can gain and be all that he can be, just like, Paul Robeson, right? There's example of slavery there. In stanza 1, where the person said that I am no wood chopper now, like my ancestors. It alludes and even it calls to mind the different treatment that his ancestors, being black, would have endured in slavery, and even after slavery. After all, the person's experience, this childhood experience, is one of those residues or effects of slavery in itself. There's examples of racism. Because of his skin color, he's discriminated against by hotel keepers and those persons of powers, those gatekeepers that we spoke about earlier. And of course, examples of prejudice and discrimination. Prejudice, therefore, refers to the beliefs that persons have in their mind about something, in this case, about the persona's race. So because he is black, You know, they're so prejudiced that he will always encounter problems whenever he try to travel the crisscross path of the globe, go to different countries. You know, it doesn't matter. It will happen subtly. It can even happen direct. This discrimination. You know, there's no secrecy, and it will not be hidden, right? So the prejudice, they remain there. And also the discrimination is the actual act, right? The actual act of discrimination, even seen by being in the classroom and being the teacher's eyes going past him, the coach or the PE teacher not actually embracing him or giving a hug whenever he scores a goal. You know, the different discriminations are there. And of course, oppression. The person feels oppressed because of his skin color, you know, to the point where he recognized that there are even persons of his skin color, in order to get a promotion or in order to get some advancement in life, that they even sing to lick boots. You know, they are being oppressed because of their skin color. And he really wishes that all these things change, to the extent that even adults are there trembling. They have this pretense bravery, this so-called bravado. The person really wishes that this was a condition that existed only in childhood, but he realized that even when he becomes big, you know, he will suffer a great big deal as well, even being an adult. We see examples of survival amidst all of this, amidst it not being acknowledged in the classroom, you know, not being given congratulatory hugs, all these other things. The person amidst all of that, he even alluded to survival, not even just for the persona, but even the persona's ancestors, because he alluded to slavery, and therefore it calls to mind the different challenges that black people would have endured, even the African slaves as well, as a result of their skin color, you know, and in some way, you know, they survived through their loved ones, you know, those who came after them. The person, of course, he continues to survive because even in his society, in order to survive in itself, as he is surviving, he constantly has to be fighting with life, because he recognized that he really wished that life will not spend me out opposing. You know, these are the things that the person continues to do in order to survive. So there are some examples of survival there. And of course, fear. We saw that fear so much so in stanza 5, where the person says that, you know, because I could suffer a big lot. Oh gosh. We see there a case where a little child, you know, he seemed to be so alone in the world, in a world or his society, where adults are supposed to be there to protect him. They are the one who have this so-called or pretended bravery, you know, this pretended courage. But he knows that really and truly that they are as fearful as he is. He recognizes that this is his lot in life, and he even wishes that other persons will not own or even experience it. You know, it's a very scary place to live in. And this is not the case that, of course, it's fiction, right? But, you know, it exists even in our world. Racism is still real, right? So these are some of the examples of the themes in this poem. Feel free to add any of them, but you should be able to find textual evidence in order to discuss them individually. And of course, their individual effectiveness. Here are some examples of some of the tones in this poem. The person is wishful, and we see that through the use of the word wish as he continues to share, or through the use of the fourth person point of view, we are privileged to hear the person's innermost thoughts and feelings about the different things he yearns for or longs for to change in his society, in order to bring an end to his pain and the discrimination that exists there. You know, there's a tone of sadness, especially in the last stanza, that I can suffer. Even the fact that he sat in the classroom and the teacher's eyes will just go past him today, him scoring a goal, and then the teacher, it implies that other players would have received a hug, but because he's black, he was not given a hug. You know, we heard sadness in the person's voice in almost every single stanza of this poem. And of course, it's very emotional. You know, it's so emotional that the person even says, even when he talked about, he wished that it's really children alone were the ones who had this pretend bravery, because he could suffer a big lot. He's even suffering in himself, right? And even when he said that torch throws of night, do you know what it means to be home in your house at night, even possibly already asleep, just to see a gang of people outside with white hooded masks and white pajamas as well, with torches in their hands, about to burn your house with you inside of it? You know, all of that. It tells us that the persona is deeply affected about and even disgusted to some extent by the behavior of his society, and not just his society, but the different races there, okay, that exist in his society, especially the race of the Ku Klux Klan as well, those who wanted white supremacy. And it's conversational because we get the idea of the person and he's speaking to us. He's telling us about his different challenges in life. He's telling us about the different experience in his classroom. We see the setting when he was in the classroom. He talks about, his desire to travel and what he expects to happen, and he wishes that was not the case. We get the idea of a little boy just being there, just pouring everything out, or just telling a silent person there listening. Okay, and of course the persona was sarcastic when he spoke about the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, when he said that he wished that they will burn light for decent time. What I didn't say earlier as well, I just wanted to emphasize, or even add a bit, that burn light there is because Christians are supposed to be the light of the world, okay? In a world where there's darkness, where persons do not know God, where persons do not know Christ, it is your duty as Christians, our duty as Christians, to always be telling persons about this light, about this life that can be found in Christ Jesus, which is should be manifested or should be demonstrated in us through the compassion and forgiveness and the different good things that we will do to persons we come in contact with. Okay, it is by that we see Christ's light as well, right? Light there in this case, literally, it's the burn light. The burning literally can be seen, or the burn of the light can be that light that they use their torches to set aflame the homes of the blacks or their sympathizers. And burn light there can be seen as the goodness and the different compassion and the different things that persons continue to do in order to highlight Christ, in order to show persons Christ and God, the love that Christ and God have for them. Okay, so that is what the person means by burn light, means demonstrate light, demonstrate salvation through Christ Jesus. Demonstrate that you are good, demonstrate purity, demonstrate love. Okay, and decent time is that certainly the times in which they are doing the activities. The Ku Klux Klan, or even bad people, not just the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan were used to basically talk about, to use their activities or the things that they did to show that they, along with other bad people, they need to, this so-called thing that they're doing in the name of God, that basically the time that they come to do it is not decent, because they will come when you're already asleep, midnight, the early hours of the morning, right? You should do it in decent time when it's daylight, or even at a decent event when the need arises to really help somebody. Okay? Of course, the person was being sarcastic because he really and truly, he really doesn't hope for them to be just going about and just burning people's houses at probably in broad daylight. Okay, which is what people usually refer to as a decent time in comparison to midnight, 2 o'clock, and so on. So of course he's being sarcastic. He's really he really means the opposite of what is expected. If you're really Christian, if you're really doing God's work, therefore you should, show compassion. And of course, there were ideas or elements of fear and even despair in the person's voice about, I could suffer, I could really, really suffer, that things really need to change, because it's bad enough that I am a child now enduring all of this, to the extent that he wishes that nobody will actually endure what he's enduring now. Okay, so feel free to add any more tones, and always remember, whatever word or adjective you come up with, you must be able to find textual evidence in the poem. So these are 3 of the moods I came up with. Feel free to add any other you may think about. I felt empathetic as the persona shares with us the different challenges that he experiences because of his skin color. Right? I felt sad, just listening to his situation, and of course anxiety because I am being of, African descent. Racism is all around us. My home country, even when you step out, it's not a case that racism is something that that is dished out or something that is done by persons who are white only. It's just persons of different races. And then it doesn't really have to be black against white. It can be black against Indian, black against Chinese. The idea is persons tend to treat you differently because you are not like them, and because of the prejudice that they have in their minds about good and bad, darkness and light. Okay, so feel free to add any other words you can think about. Thank you for listening. Please take a look at my other videos, which should be on the screen any minute now.